hopefully I'll be able to uh, present to you something about one of the most influential uh, artists of the Northern Renaissance. I was a bit secretive about this because I did not want uh, everyone to Google and come beforehand, because I wanted this to be a kind of a surprise for everyone, so that everybody learns at the same time. And let's begin. I'm having a little bit of an issue with the internet connection. Uh, I hope that does not affect us much. Am I audible?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, then I start. So, brethren, if you can see the teaser that that we had sent up from Lord Silvery Dawn, we say, "Welcome to the Door Maker." Now, there is more to it than meets the eye, and this is one of the hallmarks of this artist, that there's always more to it than meets the eye. So even in the invitation for you all to come in, there's a little bit of a secret. It's hidden in plain sight. I'll just get us to it. Can you see this? The date, 1527 AD. It stands for the year in which this art was made. It was in 1527 Anno Domini, or AD as we call it. But there's more to it than meets the eye. So AD that we see. Uh,
Hello, I can't hear anything.
Present, he just dropped off. He'll join back. Please wait.
I also can't hear anything.
Pratham, can you hear me?
Ankit, we can hear you now. You are dropped off.
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can hear you now. My recommendation is, if you've got other things running in the house, stop the other things so that you get the full bandwidth on this.
That will give. Okay, let me do so. Yes, I've just done that. Hopefully this holds now. Pratham, can you see my screen presenting?
Yes, it is.
Yes, I believe I can see it. Yeah. Okay. So, as I was saying, brethren, there is more to it than meets the eye, and that's the hallmark with this artist. So, if you can see, even in the teaser, there is more to it than meets the eye. So, if you can see this date, 1527 AD, it stands for 1527 is the year in which this art was created, and AD stands, of course, for Anno Domini, which is after Christ, as we say. But once again, there's more to it than meets the eye. So, this AD, this particular way of presentation for AD, can you see it?
Yes.
Yes, we can see it.
Yes. Okay, wonderful. So this stands for the initials of the artist, not only for 1527 AD, Anno Domini, but also stands for the initials of the artist. The name of the artist is Albrecht Dürer, AD, Albrecht Dürer. Once again, if you see the image, you can see that this image is actually the coat of arms of Albrecht Dürer and his family. So if you see here uh, at the bottom, there is the sign of a door. So we call him the door maker, and he's added the door to his coat of arms. Now the reason for that is that Albrecht Dürer, the word Dürer, this is from Nuremberg origin, okay, and the term Dürer is a morphed version of the word Führer. Führer means door maker. Okay, so he is the door maker. He has added the door to his coat of arms, and which is why I said there's more to it than meets the eye. I have even in the invitation, I have made sure that we get a proper introduction of the artist as such. The name of the artist, as I mentioned, is Albrecht Dürer. This is just a few personal details about him. Uh, he was born in Germany, Nuremberg specifically. He came from a family of goldsmiths. And most artists that you know are known for their painting. This man especially was famous for something called print making. Okay, so a lot of copies of your painting. That is what you print. You print those copies. This art was called printmaking, and there are a few techniques in printmaking like woodcuts, etchings, engraving. This is what Albrecht Dürer was very, very good at and very versatile at. In fact, he was a pioneer in a lot of these things. So when we paintings, is this the one that generally comes to our mind? The Mona Lisa. This is the one that generally comes to anybody's mind. This is one of the
Da
most
Vinci.
famous paintings on the face of the earth. This is generally what an artist works. Brethren, I'm sorry, I dropped out. So, as I was saying, this is generally what comes to our mind when we think of the art or the work of a great Renaissance artist. The Mona Lisa is one of the most famous paintings of the face of the lot of these. In fact, this image that this is a self-portrait. He's made this. This is his own image at the age of 28. So many paintings like this. He made a portrait of Maximilian the First, 15 panel. Uh, this portrait was also done by Albrecht Dürer. So he's done many like these. Saint Jerome in 1521, which is once again an oil painting. We come to not human beings, different. We see the image of the young painting, oil on canvas or oil painting. This is a watercolor in 1502. And Albert Dürer was very versatile with all of this. So most artists can do this. He was very, very good at it. If you see the textures of this. Okay, I'll just switch the camera off. Okay. So can you all see the young hair? The young hair 1502, the watercolor.
Yes, and even you sound better now.
I'm sorry, can somebody set me up with that, Brother Venkataman, perhaps? Yes, I'm sorry, President. I seem to be dropping off there. There is an issue with the internet, I suppose, since last week. So I'll just continue from where I left off. Young hair in 1502. So these are all watercolors, oil paintings. This is generally the work of most artists. Most artists work you'd see like this. And Albrecht Dürer started off with this, and he got bored of this because he could do so much more better, according to him. And then he started off with something like this. So this is the kind of work that comes out of Albrecht Dürer's workshop. This is an etching. It's not a watercolor. It's not oil on canvas. This is an etching. Uh, this was made in 1518, and the fun fact is that etchings were started, at least in recorded history, by Albrecht Dürer. The first etching that he ever made in the history of art, at least the one that is dated, done by Albrecht Dürer. Albrecht Dürer had done only etchings in 6 iron etchings in his life, and this is the biggest of them, and it is the sixth. That is the last one that he made. This view is of a drawing that he had made of the Franconian village of uh, Kirchenbach. And what is important about this is that this was symbolically speaking. Uh, so here, at the right, these are figures of the Turkish threat to Christian Europe. This was around the time. This was around the time that the influence of the Turks was increasing, and giving, and they were using cannons in their warfare as compared against Christian Europe, and they were succeeding very well. So this is symbolically representing the cannon. Symbolically represents uh, the Turkish threat to Christian. The next one, President, can you see the next one? It's a rhinoceros. Brother Venkatraman, can you just help me out? Can you see this?
Yes, yes, we can see it. Go ahead.
Can you see the rhinoceros?
Yes, we can see the rhinoceros.
Can you see the rhinoceros on the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So this is a woodcut. It's a different kind of artwork of a rhinoceros in 1515. Okay, you must be thinking it's a rhinoceros. It doesn't even look like an actual rhinoceros. What is the big deal about this painting? About this woodcut, right? So let me just tell you what's so good about this. It is the fact that Albrecht Dürer has made a woodcut of this. That is, he's cut this on wood, okay, and he's got all the uh, all the curvatures around the ears, and also well even on a woodcut. And the most important thing is Albrecht Dürer had never ever seen a rhinoceros in his life. He has made this woodcut without seeing a rhinoceros ever in his life. This image is based on a written description of an Indian rhinoceros, which had arrived in Lisbon, Portugal in 1515. Okay, Dürer has never seen the actual rhinoceros, and this was in fact the first living rhinoceros to be seen in Europe since the Roman times. This was sent as a gift from the King of Portugal to Pope Leo X. But this rhinoceros died in a shipwreck, okay, off the coast of Italy. And nobody else saw live rhinoceros in Europe until I think 1577, which is about 60 years after that. So that is what makes this so wonderful. That based on eyewitnesses' description, Alfred Tudor has managed to make such a wonderful representation of a rhinoceros. The other thing is most this image of the rhinoceros is what took Europe fancy, and yes, Rajan, I'm sorry. Yeah. So as I was saying, that this image of a rhinoceros is what took Europe's fancy, and this is what Europe thought a rhinoceros looks like. In fact, until the late 1930s, this image of Dürer appeared in school textbooks in Germany as a faithful image of the rhinoceros. Okay, so they thought that in textbooks, children were taught this is what a rhinoceros looks like. This is so influential in art. Now, these we've seen examples of woodwork, we've seen an etching. Now, but engravings is what Albrecht Dürer was the best at, and yeah. So engravings is what Albert Dürer was the best at. So what is an engraving? It's the practice of incising a design onto a hard or usually a flat surface, like steel or copper, by cutting grooves into it with a burin. A burin is what is shown on the left hand side. This is the instrument that is used to incise the design on the copper sheet or on the steel sheet. The result of such an activity is either a decorated object, like you have engravings in locks, you have engravings in glasses and porcelain and so on, or it could be an intaglio printing plate of copper or any other metal for printing images on paper. These images are also called engravings. Okay. Now this is a much more difficult technique than say etching, because as you will see in the next few pieces of art, that they are all engravings. Okay, and these it's so difficult to make them, to shape each and every part of them with this burin, that this was a very difficult skill to learn, and most artists went on to etching and rather than engraving, right? So Albrecht Dürer made three major engravings in his life. These are called his Masterstich, or the great work of the three great works of art. All three of them were engravings. Okay, the first one is Night, Death, and the Devil. This was made in 1513, and this is a copper engraving. Okay, this is an engraving on a copper sheet. Here we can see that there is an armored knight who is accompanied by his dog. If you look down towards the legs of the horse, you can see a dog. Okay, and uh, yeah. So and this knight is riding with his dog through a narrow gorge, which is flanked by a goat-headed devil. You can see on the right, just behind the horse, is a devil which has the head of a goat. Okay, and there is a figure of death to the left hand side. So just in front of the knight, you can see an old man, which is death. If you can see, there's another horse just behind the horse of the knight. So this is this is the horse of Death. So Death is riding on this horse. He has an hourglass in his hand. Can you see the hourglass just on top of the mane of the horse? That is an hourglass which Death is holding. It's a reminder to the knight that his life is short. The knight moves on through the scene, looking away from the creatures lurking around him. Uh, he is often seen as a symbol of courage. Okay, the knight's armor defends him against attacks. In this case, this is the Christian faith. This is the Christian knight, and it is said to represent that his faith is his armor, which protects him from death and the devil both. Okay, we see to the left, to the bottom left hand of the image, there is an image of a skull, and there is a date once again, 1513. That is when this artwork was created. Now, in his three masterpieces, which is one is the Knight, the Death, and the Devil, and the other two, the dog, the skull, they are repeating, and the hourglass, they are repeating. Okay, so these three images are there even in the next two, even in the next two artworks. So this is supposed to be based on the popular quote, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." This is from Psalm 23, and this is what is denoted by this image. Brethren, I'd like to draw your attention to the intricate details which are present in this image. This is an engraving. This is not a painting. It's not made by pencil. This is not made by a pen or painting. This is an engraving was taken by Albert Dürer, and it was engraved into this. Each and every line of this was engraved. Okay. The next one, the second most important part of his masterpiece or the major artwork is Saint Jerome in his study. This was a painting. This was an engraving in 1514. This is also on copper engraving. If you can see that Saint Jerome is working hard in his study, and if you notice that there is this one line, which is an imaginary line which extends from the head of from the head of Saint Jerome to the skull. You can see that it passes through the cross which is on his table. Okay, so this is a gentle reminder that from life, which is Saint Jerome, he's alive, from life unto death, in the path unto death, the cross or the religion or your faith carries you safely. It is on one line altogether. This is the significance, especially of Saint Jerome in his study. The second is, if you notice that they say that there is a point of viewership to every such image, to every such artwork. In this case, the point of viewership for the viewer is far away, far removed from the room. He is able to create the effect where you see this image as though you are looking at it from a doorway. You are not involved in this picture at all. Okay. Once again, we see the skull and the dog and the hourglass right behind. The skull, the dog, and the hourglass. All three of them are included in the masterpiece. Now we go on to the third and probably the most viewed, the most discussed work of Albrecht Dürer, and that is Melancholia the First. This is once again a copper engraving in 1514, right? We can see that the central subject of this print is is an enigmatic and a gloomy winged female figure which is thought to be a personification of melancholia. Right? She is holding her head in her hand. In her hand, she has a compass. Okay, uh, and she stares. She sorry, Dresden. So as I was saying that this is the image of a gloomy female figure who's winged. Okay, this is thought to be a personification of melancholia. She is in her hand. She holds her head and she's holding a compass. Okay, this is the tool of creation, right? And if you can see that there are many aspects to this painting. Uh, One is that you can see this dog who is sleeping right there. There is a sphere. Now this sphere is a perfect. It's a perfect sphere. It has uh, it has its diameter, which is sorry, its diameter, which is roughly the same as the one measured by the compass. Okay. Second, if you can see, is the solid at the back. Can you see the solid at the back? It is it's an irregular shaped solid. Okay. This is called a truncated rhombohedron. This object is a truncated rhombohedron. Okay, and this is a very unusual solid. In fact, uh, it was never geometrically represented before this image, and post this, there has been a lot of research into this. I believe they're called Archimedes' solid. That we will see that a bit later also. But this is a truncated rhombohedron, and a lot of and this came to the attention of mathematicians after this. And there is a small baby angel-like figure right in front, and on the truncated rhombohedron, you can see an image of you can see a faint image. So some call it the face of death, some call it even the face of Albrecht Dürer, right? Uh, but the most important thing after this is if you can notice that there is once again the hourglass, there's a dog, and there is something here which is, can you see a square on the wall? There are a few numbers inside. This is called a magic square. Okay, we'll just delve into that shortly. So this is an image of the magic square. This is a 4 by 4 square, and this is the first one which is printed in Europe. Okay. Now, what is so important about this square is that all the numbers from 1 to 16 are present here, and they are put in such a uh, they're put in such a format that the sum adds up to 34. But the sum of what? So the sum of every row, or the sum of every column, or the sum of every diagonal. All of this adds up to the number 34. Okay, not only that, but these are made of 16 squares, right? So 4 squares each. If you add up the sum of all of these, once again, the sum stands up to 34. In fact, even the middle square, the sum once again adds up to 34. And not only that, brethren, if you see the last two squares, he has managed to arrange it such that it denotes the year of the painting, this of the engraving. This was engraved in 1514, right? So if you can see the genius of this man, he has managed to put magic square. He has managed to put a magic square, which is not a big part of the image. To be honest, it's not. The image is not called magic. So as I don't, I'm not sure. Have you could you please help me out? Anybody on the meeting? Can you please just help me out? Have you heard all about magic square?
Yes, we heard about all these quests. Please proceed.
Okay, wonderful, great. So
Including
as I said,
1514 being the year of the engraving.
wonderful, wonderful, great. So thank you. Uh, Sorry, I'm having a bit of connectivity issues. So these were, as I mentioned, about the engravings of Albert Dürer. He made this a very famous art form, and Albert Dürer. What? Why would you want to go into an engraving when you can do all this with water paint or with watercolor? The reason is that uh, you can these engravings are techniques of print making. Okay, so it is very easy for you to make lots of copies of each of these. Each of them are original copies. Okay, each of them are original copies, and Albert Dürer used to travel with them wherever he used to go. So he used to travel to, say, Venezia, or to Florence, or to Firenze, and wherever he would go, he would be carrying these, so he could easily sell them, which made it so much more a better commercial enterprise than somebody who would just paint one painting at one time. Most of the artists, what they used to do was they used to make to order. Now, this man had an image in his mind, he made it, and he made multiple copies of it. And uh, once you make the copy, you destroy the mold. So they become limited edition. So you make 25 copies, you make 30 copies, and you sell only that many, and people have only that many number of copies. Yeah. So uh, the genius of any man uh, of the Renaissance is that they're not kept to just one thing. He's not only a great painter, or he's not only a great uh, artist. He's also Albert Dürer has also written 4 books on measurement. The first book deals with linear geometry, which includes work on helices, conchoids, and epicycloids. I'm pretty sure most of us have not even heard of don't even know what a conchoid is or an epicycloid is. Uh, you can look this up. Later on, I'll just make an image to show you, if I can, what an epicycloid looks like. Uh, the second book was on 2D geometry, which is, well, your regular polygons. Okay. The third one was Principles of Geometry to Architecture, Engineering, and Typography. So when he says architecture, he applied the principle of geometry to crenellations, to fortifications in castles and forts. Also typography. So even the way the alphabet was constructed in Latin, he found a way to apply the principles of geometry to that. And the fourth book had work on 3D forms and the construction of polyhedra. So many different kinds of polyhedrons, 3D forms of these polyhedra. The general ones that you know are cuboid, or a rectangular parallelepiped, and so on. these were irregularly shaped solids, just like Archimedes had irregularly shaped objects. These were irregularly shaped 3D objects. So it's very difficult to even imagine them. And this man has written books on them. He's also written 4 books on human proportion. So book 1 shows 5 differently constructed types of male and female figures, all parts of the body, as you can see on the image to the right. They are all expressed in fractions of the total height. Okay. He came out with a second book, which dealt with 8 further types of image making. This is broken down not into fractions, but on an Albertian system. Okay. Now that means it is so it is in different kinds of columns like this that he's broken it down. The third book is principles by which proportions of the figure can be of the figures can be modified, including physiognomy. So what that means is, in the way that you want to make a person's face look strong like the lion. So these are the ways in which. So the third book deals with that. Uh, you make a person look meek or timid, based on trying to make his face look a little bit like maybe a rat's or a mouse's or a rabbit's or a hare. And you make a strong face with a lion or a tiger, something like that. So human face with that kind of physiognomy. And the last book was related to the theory of movement. With this, I come to the end of my presentation. Uh, I'd like to thank everyone for allowing me a chance to bring this artist to the fore. He is by no means a small artist. He's hugely appreciated in Germany. In fact, he's called the German Leonardo da Vinci. He has been so influential in in art in Germany especially. Uh, he's part of the Northern Renaissance. He could effectively take his principles and blend them in with what was generally going on in the Renaissance at that point in time. Uh, he died pretty rich also. Once again, in no small part to his being able to understand the commercial aspect of his work as well. So making many copies of that in print and being able to sell them readily. Uh, this image I have chosen especially because it says thank you. Also, it is one of Albert Dürer's images. It's that of hands praying. Okay, and this is done solely in pen, ink and pen. That is all. It's not done by brushwork or artwork or any of the sort. So once again, it's a testament to what a great artist he is. Thanks are in order. I would like to thank uh, Lord Silvery Dawn, my mother lodge. This is where I am. This is always home for me, and I would like to thank my seniors, especially Dr. Char, my worshipful master, Brother Madhav Nair, for always encouraging us. All our seniors for always encouraging us. All the juniors for all the juniors for always standing by me, and why I wanted to share this was was because we are told in the charge after initiation that we have to try as much as possible to learn about the arts as well. It's a solitary journey most of the time. In the sense, we don't have anybody to lead us on to the journey or guide us or help us out, or just walk with us in general on that journey. And uh, I just wanted to bring that into our lives, and uh, I wanted to show you all what I like because uh, I want that people in Lodges should be closer to each other as brethren. We should be brethren not only in name, but you should understand what your brother likes and what he does not like, and and hopefully we can all increase each other's knowledge also like that. That was the point of this exercise. Thank you so much, brethren, and I'm sorry for the internet issues. I don't know; it's been happening since last week. I don't know why that's happening, but Thank you so much for giving me a chance to speak, and thank you all for attending. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Brother Ankit. I think, very clearly, a lot of hard work put in terms of research. And I'm sure quite a few of us didn't know about this particular Renaissance artist. When you had mentioned about your topic, I was doing a bit of research myself to see was there any influence of the Renaissance artists on masonry, and surprisingly there is. And I believe there is some institution in US which actually promotes this. And you're very right. I think art is also something which masonry, sort of is closely associated with and sort of encourages. It was very interesting, very different from what we have had so far. I would have loved if you had added some bits of how it was linked with masonry. It would have been great, because Renaissance movement had a lot to do with masonry too. I think there are a lot of papers on that. I'll open up the floor, and if there are any questions for Brother Ankit, please feel free to ask. And
Can I
yeah,
step?
1 minute, Dr. Char.
Yes.
So very much, Brother Venkat, if you can stop the recording, please. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Char.